Are we ready? All right, we'll now call the city council special meeting to order for October the 5th, 6 p.m. Please rise to the invocation and pledge of allegiance. The invocation is given by Councilwoman Brenda Gray.
God is. And Father, we have to thank you for allowing us to be here this evening. Father God, we want to thank you for everything that you've done for us. Bless us during this meeting time, dear Father. Bless our ladies, bless our military, bless our armed forces people, and everybody that does anything positive for anybody. Father God, we ask for your forgiveness for all that we've done wrong, knowingly and unknowingly. We ask you to forgive us, dear Father. We ask you to bless our city of Avon Park. We ask this and every blessing in thy name, says, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. May we see. Madam Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Councilmember Bernard.
Here.
Councilmember Gray.
Here.
Councilmember Sutherland.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Spurlock.
Here.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. All right, we have one item on our agenda to discuss the possible regulations of mobile food vendors. There was a recent rule change that was put forward, so there's only a couple things that we have set in stone, and the rest is kind of left up to us to interpret. So first thing would be that the new law forbids local governments from requiring licenses, permits, registration, or fees. That also forbids local governments to prohibit mobile food dispensing vehicles from operating. This within the entirety of the entity's jurisdiction. So basically, we could not ban food service vehicles from the city citywide. Now, having said that, Jerry here, our city attorney, did put forward quite a few possible codes and different variations that we can go with. I'm hoping we've all had a chance to kind of look those over and get an idea of what we would be looking for. But I think another key reason why we're here is to hear from some of the potential vendors that are in the audience and kind of see what maybe they would like to share. So I do see Jerry is now on Zoom. Jerry, can you hear us? I think you're muted, Jerry.
I'm up in the mountains in North Carolina.
There we go. Okay, did you hear that introduction that I gave there, Jerry?
No, I didn't hear that.
Okay, I basically just read over the new rules from the new law that got put forward, and basically says that you have put forward to us quite a few regulations.
Right. I sent a memo, which you all should have, basically describing the fact that the new law is it does preempt a lot of things. That you can't prohibit them 100%, but there are a lot of things that you can still regulate. And then some things that I thought you may be able to regulate, but why? So I laid out basically in the memo a list of basically a grocery list of regulations to consider as to whether you want to regulate these things. And certainly, in my opinion, I think they're a good thing. And as I said before, I wouldn't want to prohibit them anyway. But you want to recognize the fact that the restaurants have a big investment going on, and they pay taxes, and they also have a lot of money in leases or ownership of buildings and equipment and things like that they don't have in these food trucks. So it's you have to find a balance as to what you want to do regulatory wise.
Okay. Well, at this point, I think it'd be appropriate to hear from the people in the audience. I'm assuming food truck operators. So anyone wishing to speak, just come up to the microphone. You, sir, be first. Just please give your name and address before you start.
My name is John Scott. I live at 45 the Flame Road, by the Mountain Range. So I guess I'm kind of the reason for this. I've been calling and asking about what it would take to open a coffee truck in this town. I grew up here. My family's up here for over 90 years. I went in the military in 2005, right as I graduated high school. I came back in 2016 after being medically retired, and we've been trying to figure out what to do with my physical limitations. I've got a wife and 4 kids, and my wife was wanting a coffee shop since we were in high school. And I'm a farmer at heart. I've got an acre of mangoes that should be in production in a couple of years. So we came up with a plan that we would start a coffee truck versus open a brick and mortar store at this time. And my end of the deal is I get to sell mangoes out of it, so I'll have to take up the all in 3 years, because you don't allow that in city limits, but you have time for that. So with the coffee truck, these mobile food vending vehicles, they're a big thing in the United States now. There's over 23,800 active food trucks in the U.S. It's a $2 billion a year industry. It's outgrowing the commercial industry by 5.4% versus 4.3%. It's got a 2% annual growth rate. Demographic most likely to visit these are 18 to 34-year-olds, followed closely by 35 to 44-year-olds. Over 90% of customers surveyed by Mobile Cuisine in Seattle rated the experience as excellent or good. And the bottom line is these trucks are becoming a big thing in like now. They're coming to Avon Park, Winter Haven, Sebring, Lake Placid. They all have food truck events. They're very supportive of them, and Avon Park is kind of the last one in that line. We're literally surrounded by them. With my coffee truck, it's just I built it with this town in mind. When I was in Alaska, people would ask what my hometown was, and I said it was surrounded by cow pastures and orange trees, and that's kind of how I built my truck. It's a converted horse trailer. It turned out beautifully. Some of you all have seen some of the work in progress pictures of it. I should be set open in 2 weeks, have all my license and insurance and everything done. But I just want to make sure that, that I'm going about it the right way, because I've seen plenty of food trucks here, but that's just not how I want to do it. My whole goal is to source locally. Everything I could buy in Avon Park, I didn't buy in Avon Park to build this truck. I source my beans from Lakeland, my syrups from Orlando, so I'm trying to keep everything as local as possible. That's important to me. When I was growing up, my dad used to hate to drive through downtown Avon Park because there was always something going on, and he just liked to avoid the traffic. But now we only have a few events, during the year. I know this year's now fire because of COVID, but barring this year, it's just not as active as it used to be, and I hate to see that. And I could easily go to Sebring or the other places. It's not too far to drive, but this is my home, and I want Avon Park to do well. So I know there's been some concern with the other restaurants, but some things considered is I have to partner with a local restaurant and pay them a fee as my commissary, somewhere I can fill gray water or dump gray water and fill fresh water. So I have to partner with at least one of them for that, so I'll be paying them a fee. I've had several businesses approach me and ask if, when I get this up and running, if I could set up in their parking lot, because it draws people into their store that they might not otherwise get. I've even spoken with the owners of those buildings, and they are more than happy to rent me a parking spot and get a little extra revenue that way. I've done a lot of surveys with people and in my church and family and friends, and I have several people. They get up every morning and they drive all the way to Sebring to go to Starbucks. And then when they're done with their coffee at Starbucks, they go shop at all the Sebring stores. I know we don't have as many stores here, but if you can keep them local, they'll shop local for the most part. So I know that there's also been concern about, we don't want the streets lined with food trucks, up and down. And I understand that, and I guess there should be some kind of regulation for it, but the way that generally works is, like for my business, I do catering, events, weddings, sales. There's supposed to be a penny salon open up here at Avon Park, and they ask for their grand opening to draw, something for their customers. So, lost train of thought a little bit there. But anyway, the point is that there's more pros to these than cons. You can regulate this out of, untenable for me to set up an Avon Park, and I'll have to go elsewhere. But the way that it would typically work is I'll get a call and say, hey, I'm having an event next week. Can you come set up? My church is doing their fall festival, and they asked me to come set up there. So in this case, I have almost a month's notice, but I might have a day or two notice. I've had, because I haven't finished my license yet, I've turned down 4 or 5 catering events just because, that were last minute. So when you're thinking about your regulations, if I have to apply for a permit 2 weeks ahead of time to do an event, that's not going to work. It's not tenable for me to be able to do something like that. I know I spoke, I probably bugged them quite a bit, Mr. LaBelle, calling about code regulations, and there was mention about how they were selling firewood and they set up too many days out of the year, something like that. So if you even do it so many days a year, that would hurt me, but I'd still be able to do events. I would just wouldn't be able to do, hey, can you come set up this week for half a month? For me, that would cause. Yeah, I can set up here for a couple days, or I can set up here for 2 weeks if you're doing a long event. So you can really make this a great thing for our community. They're coming either way, and if you make it too difficult, they'll probably do like to do it now and just not tell you that they're coming. But I think with some sensible regulation, that keeps in mind that if I'm setting up just for a small event like a grand opening at a tanning salon, I might make $100. So if I have to pay $50 permit fee, it's not worth the time. So I agree there should be some kind of permitting or whatever for it, if that's what you choose to do. Now, the libertarian side of me thinks your rule book is thick enough as it is and on anything else, but if you insist on doing it, at least take into consideration what goes into these businesses and the setup and the costs that are associated with it, and the kind of revenue. Now, I might make $100 at a smaller opening, but if I were to do something like the Highlands County Fair, that could be a whole other story, because there's hundreds of people going there, and they're all going to those trucks and vendors anyway. So you have to kind of price that appropriately. You can't price me out of business, and you just have to take that into consideration.
I think it said in the new regulation, we cannot do license permits.
Well, that's even better. I didn't see that regulation. I didn't know there was a memo posted, so I wrote all this down from my own research.
Let me ask you a question. What is your name again?
John Scott.
Mrs. Scott. Okay. You said a coffee truck. Would you be a coffee vending machine? Where?
No, ma'am. So just like you go to Starbucks or
Yeah.
order a latte or a cold
Ranges
brew.
and other things.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. We make it all their own truck. It's all self-contained. I don't have to hook up sewage or nothing like that. It's all self-contained.
If at any point staff has questions for the person up here, go ahead, feel free to jump in.
I have a comment and a couple of questions, if you don't mind, Mayor. I lived in California for 16 years, so I'm very familiar with what we call lunch trucks. And that was mainly because there were so many large businesses that had, 50 or 100 or 200 employees that were maybe, 5 or 10 miles from any place they could eat lunch or eat any meal, actually. So they were pretty common throughout the state of California. They could pull up to a large, like a company like Northrop or even AT&T or something like that, and they'd pull up like 2 times a day, and they'd be in and out in about 30 minutes. And then actually the food was very good and reasonable. And without it, the people would be almost impossible to do anything other than bring their own meal. And to be honest with you, I don't ever want to drink a cup of coffee out of a vending machine. And I actually think that a coffee truck would be a great start and a great option for here, because I think that's one of the things I've noticed too is, people talk about going to get a cup of coffee. There is one place that sells donuts on 27 might have coffee, and some of the other fast food places have coffee, but I think there's nothing better than what I call real coffee that's, grounded fresh. And so I like the idea of your business. And one of my questions I think you sort of answered was with you and as well as any other vendors is like, how often would you, come into service here? Are you looking for, a daily or weekly or just an event type thing to where you, and then of course, well, the other second one would be locations of where you would do it. So if you could fill us in a little bit like that, John, a couple of things, and you kind of answered my question in advance, I think, but if you can just kind of follow up, I'd appreciate that.
Yes, sir. So my business model was mainly events, but I would be more than happy to support any business that would ask if I come set up, or having a sale. Pure Grid asked if I could set up their business every day, because it draw people in, because they've got their produce thing going, and it would just work great for everybody. And the only reason I spoke to the owner, he was happy to rent me a parking space, more revenue for him, and everybody seemed happy about that. I understand there's different zoning for different places, but for me, being an event based, I would maybe set up once a week somewhere in town, might not even be on Main Street, a little business around here. My goal is to be open 1 to 2 days a week, just at a location, and then do events. I've got a wife and 4 kids to rent, to take care of. I'm a pretty busy man, so having another 9 to 5 full-time college, you name it. So that's my business model. Now there's another coffee business in town already, and they have genius marketing plan. They take coffee right to you, you order it, and they bring their little van there, and they make the coffee right there in the parking lot. That's not the model I went with. More power to them. But there's coffee is a big thing, and the food business, the restaurants in general. If you try to go to any fast food restaurant at 12 o'clock when everybody's taking lunch break, you're lucky to get out of there by the time your lunch break's out. So having more options is always a good thing. Yeah, for me personally, I wouldn't be setting up 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. I'm going to be more of an occasional. I'm here. I'm doing an event here. I'm doing a golf tournament here or 5K. But I would like the option if a business asked me to come set up, because especially in Avon Park, that I say, yeah, I can be there tomorrow and be able to do that. So,
I have one other comment too that's brought up, and Jared brought up in his information, and other, as well as the mayor, about the fact that this could be competition to some local restaurants, the brick and mortar ones that, pay for the building, pay rent, they pay taxes. There's been several little restaurants that have opened up in this town and didn't really stay open for more than a year or so. And I'm not really personally concerned about the competition that some of these trucks would take away from those places. I think that it's just another option, whether you go to McDonald's or Burger King or anything else. We used to have a barbecue truck that was stayed out a little bit on the south east side, but then eventually went into a permanent trailer, I believe. And so he's been there for years. I believe he's still there. So I really don't think it's going to be a big competition to where a food truck that's going to take competition away from our restaurants. It isn't like we have a lot of large businesses in town to where people are, say, bring the food to me. I don't think that's going to be happening on a regular basis. So I'm all for it. As far as regulations, I'm ready to hear whatever the rest of the council wants to talk about.
I have one other question. And now in our write-up here, it says that the use of city property and right-of-ways. So you would definitely be on private property? Is that what you're?
yes, ma'am. So to be honest with you, the place that I would like to be the most, directly across from Deer Creek, across the railroad tracks there. Is that city parking lot y'all built? I mean, then when I was first doing this, so if you were having an event like they do Bet Jam and Blueberry Fest and stuff like that, and also Park, if there was an event, I'd love to be able to set up there. But that would be, but I don't know the procedure for that. I guess that's why we're here. So mainly I would do private property, but I would like the option for an event going on to be able to set up on city property.
For events, that's the event vendor. I mean,
The event sponsor typically is the one that gets permission from the city, and then we give them permission, and then they go out and get their vendors, and it would be an agreement between you and the sponsor of the event. So, they use city properties and things like that. I have technical questions. I totally get what you want, and the only thing I would not want to see is, a pizza truck parked up in front of Little Italy. But unless Little Italy wants them in his backyard, right? But because you can't do it on public property, and I would hope that anytime anyone has an event, that they wouldn't do that to the local businesses also. That's usually on the organizer to make sure that there's some compatibility with whatever else is already here and not infringe on their services, because after all, they've taken the big risk as well. But my questions were more technical for the city attorney. I would love to hear from other potential vendors that are out there, but so if you want to stand there, that's fine, because this might relate to you as well, but I just had some questions for him. Jerry?
Yes.
Okay, so on section, doesn't have a page, third from the back, page 7, I'm sorry, page 7 of 9, it's B4. It says here that mobile food dispensing vehicles operating at a site for a duration of more than 3 hours shall have a written agreement available upon request. That's with the city, I presume, correct? Or would that be with the owner of the property where he would be renting?
Well,
that
they would need the owner of the property's permission to be there at all.
for the bathroom?
And the city, I would not recommend that you allow use of city property except for special events where you arrange for, as you said, that they're properly distributed so that they're not going to compete with your bricks and mortar restaurants.
Okay, so you're saying that you, Scott, Mr. Scott?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, that you already have coordinated some type of an agreement with a local restaurant to go ahead and park in his
Yes,
property?
ma'am. So no offense to anybody here, I'd much rather deal with private citizens than the government. So
Right,
it's just easier because I can say, hey, can I come sit up here? Yeah, I'll pay you $20 to use.
So will they be open at all the times that you plan on doing this? Because if the issue is that you have to have a bathroom for your employees or yourself as designated in section B4, letter B, number 4, it says that you have to confirm that your employees have access to a flushable permanent restroom within the operation site during the hours of operation. So would you be doing coffee somewhere where they don't have, where they're not open? Would you have keys to get in there? And
It depends.
so that's where this letter.
That would be something I would just have to work out. Hey, what day you want me there? I'll need access to a bathroom. So like with your, they're my cousins. So like, yeah, here you go. And that's something I have to work out with them. But if that's a regulation I got to follow, then I'll know to ask. Say, hey, if I'm going to operate after these hours, I just need access to the bathroom. That goes with regulation.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is I know that in our LDR, if you're a business, a bona fide car salesman, for example, and you don't have a restroom, you have to get permission from your neighbor to go use their bathroom.
Yes.
So it's just like everyone else.
Yes, ma'am. That's
the other
it.
question-
So we move on from that one. So this says within 3 hours. Would you be there more than 3 hours, you think?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Generally, I would. Yes.
So the letter that would be available upon request would be from either code enforcement or someone that would come and say, hey, where's the letter of permit from the property owner that we can see, because, there have been vendors outside of the city limits that use the bushes behind them, and it's a sanitary condition, and, people can get their reputations ruined if they're not having a place where they can wash their
Oh, yes,
hands.
ma'am. That's regulation. That's an easy thing to read.
Right. Okay, do you by any chance have any type of permitting or anything from that county health department?
No, ma'am. So for the mobile food vendors, you're only required permit from the state.
Okay, so Jerry, what about ice cream trucks? Because we do have ice cream trucks that run around town. Are they going to need to have something like this? I mean, they park on city right away to. I think they stop. Yeah, they stop in the road.
Oh, can I clarify something?
Yeah.
For my level of food trucks, there's different classifications. For mine, I'm only required in the state. Some of the other ones that prepare cooked meals where they have raw meat on the truck, they're required a few other things. That's not my way.
Okay, Jerry, are you back?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so I was asking about ice cream trucks. Are we gonna have to do anything with ice cream trucks with this thing here? Because there is one that drives around town and stops in the middle of the road to sell ice cream. I don't have a problem with it. I've never seen a backup of traffic. But is there gonna be an issue with someone like
Well,
that?
That's going to be different because you see, I segregated the two types of food trucks, as the law does as well, that into the ones that have prepared food, like ice cream trucks, or those I don't know what they call them. I've got it in my memo, but I don't have it in front of me. But the ones we used to call roach coaches that come to the construction sites, and the ones that Jim were talking about, where they sell prepared sandwiches and things like that. They don't cook food on site. That's different than the food trucks. And I would consider, even a coffee truck, if all they had were just the dispensers of already prepared coffee, that would be one of the type that I was talking about that's already prepared. But if they're going to be making espresso and lattes and things like that, then obviously that would be cooking. And so that's falls in the second category, which we're going to regulate. We're not going to regulate the first one, which is the ice cream trucks and the prepared sandwich trucks.
Okay,
By the state law, my truck is under the pre-prepared, so it's not a cooking truck. So I'm required a lower level of license than someone who's making hamburgers.
Do you have a generator that makes noise?
Yes, ma'am.
So is that going to be an issue, Jerry, in terms of, I'm just going to back up a little bit. I know that in residential areas, you can open up a church, right? You can
Oh,
open a church.
yeah, sure. Well, I mean, it would fall under your sound ordinance. It doesn't matter, what you do regulation here, you still have the noise ordinance, which that people would have to comply with. I don't know. I mean, most of the generators are inside of an area, in a compartment in the food truck, which is insulated, so it doesn't create a lot of noise. But I would think that if it was going to be for a very short amount of time, like lunch hour or 2 hours of lunch, then or an event, then it probably wouldn't be as much of an issue.
Now, he sells coffee, which is a morning drink. So, we have some zones that are adjacent to a residential. I mean, C4 is just 1 block away from Res R1 and R1A. So, I mean, would there
Yeah.
be an issue? I don't know.
There could be. Yeah, it just depends on how many decibels it was, because we follow the county's ordinance.
Oh, and
So
inverter
I would just strongly encourage him to have, to get that checked out, with the decibel meter.
Okay, the other issue or question I had was, what about empty properties, Jerry? I know that according to what you've written here, they cannot take up parking spaces that are within the limits of the zoning requirements of a certain. So what if there's an empty storefront, or better yet, let's say a gas station that's closed? Obviously, it's not open, so therefore, there's no parking requirement because the business is not open with an occupational license, and a food truck could go in there. I'm using the example of the corner of Highway 27 and Main Street. There's a gas station there, and on occasion, there's been someone that sets up shop there and sells.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, barbecue is prepared normally, prepared food, but and we're going to be dealing with sidewalk sales such as that at a later date. It's not included in this. I just felt like this was more important right now since it was an issue with code enforcement. But we're still going to have to deal with sidewalk sales as well, which are, a different story, like barbecue and, things like that. But it sounds to me like a place you could put a food truck, I mean, if they had permission of the owner.
So pretty much every building in Lemon Park has built out its parking to capacity, because obviously they want to use as much as they can and enough to have mitigation for drainage and whatnot. How are you compatible with a parking to park your truck there if it's all at full capacity in terms of its limits of use?
Well, 2 things. One, I asked Mr. LaBelle there, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm able to, if it's zoned for that, correct?
It's zoning.
And also, I wouldn't be going there unless the people ask me to go there. I do something, I have to work out, like, look, I need this much space, I have an 18-foot trailer, so I need a standard parking space. I can't set up, in the grass or anything like that. I gotta be level. So if they want me there, they just have to take that into account, that, I'm gonna be taking up one of your limited parking spaces.
Okay, so Jerry, the other question I had was, we had a vendor from out of town that sets up shop at 10 p.m. and they'll sell sweets and candies and clothes. And you can go walk up into their trailer, they have their headlights on, they're disruptive to the neighbors and stuff. So what do we do about someone like that if they're selling food and on the side they sell clothes?
Yeah, I think we when we talked about that before, it was that's outside of proper zoning for that. And then I would think you can establish reasonable hours for those types of sales as well, even if it's inside of proper zoning. But as I recall, that was outside proper zoning. And there is part of the zoning that requires that all sales that are not otherwise approved have to be done inside of a building, and that would violate that as well.
So the other question that I was trying to allude to earlier was, churches are allowed to open up in residential communities. So would a food vendor be allowed to go on top of a church property during the day, even though it's in a residential, but it's on a church property?
as long as it was far enough away from the other residential property.
What's the distance?
And here, 100 feet. You got 100 feet from residential development for a vacant piece of land.
Well, and bear in mind, you can establish your own regulations regarding how far you want it from, an R zoning, and so on. You can establish that distance. The only thing we got to make sure we don't do is we don't establish such tight regulations that we prohibit them by virtue of the regulations, which I think would be problematic.
No, I don't want to do that either. I just want to make sure that, when something is done, that we all understand exactly where it falls. I don't, someone calls and they're insisting that.
Yeah, well, I think that at this point, all we were really talking about is, what are the possibilities? And, the next meeting, on the 12th, I would hope, I could get some feedback and tell me, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see this, I'd like to see this, and I can put together, the first draft ordinance based on that.
Well, like I said, my one was the vacant not a vacant, the empty storefront. If the parking already is meant to be compatible with zoning at a gas station, but yet the gas station is closed, then that would be a good spot for a food vendor because, for example, parking. And you don't have to be in compliance with the zoning aspect because the storefront is closed. Wouldn't that be something that?
Well, I think it would fall within the zoning chances are. I mean, it'd be like a C2 or something like that, would think. Anyway, so I mean, you're gonna allow it, I would think, in the really rougher zones, and then maybe cut it off at the business zoning and level, as to setting up on parking lot of an engineering firm, let's say, that sort of thing.
Do you have any other questions for Mr. Scott?
The other question I had is, Jerry had put on here, and I don't know what your sign looks like, Mr. Scott, but it says that the menu display board must not be located more than 5 feet from the local food dispensing vehicle, and it has to be compliant with our own sign ordinances, our sign regulations.
Yeah, the only thing I couldn't, Maria, the only thing I couldn't find a sandwich sign regulation in your sign ordinance, and that may be something we may have to add, because it really does make sense, if they're going to allow that type of sale, for them to have a sandwich sign they can put out. But other than that, there has to be something that's permanently attached to their unit.
Now, what about those folding signs? Yeah.
That's what I have.
Yeah, a sandwich sign. They call it a sandwich sign.
Is there anything else, Mr. Scott?
I have something.
Go ahead.
Just strictly from a personal standpoint, talking to Mr. Scott. As you know, code enforcement, we're normally reactive in this. And we're normally dealing with people who don't really care about compliance in the city. Mr. Scott reached out to me. He was proactive. He didn't try to do something ahead of time and try to find a loophole, or he's done it the right way, the way it should be done. And I appreciate that, being in the position I am. And I am the one that basically reached out to the city manager, Jared, because in my short tenure here, and I can tell you it's more than the people in this room, this has been the hottest, probably the most frequent phone call I get. It's not so much complaints about so-and-so's trash. It's putting up a food truck in the city limits. And I'm telling you, I'm glad we're here, because, I actually posed this to Jeff Schmucker one time, and he couldn't find it in the LDR either. So he said, well, if it's not in the LDR, then I guess it's up to the interpretation of the city manager whether he wants to allow it, which is ridiculous. And
Well, I don't think it's true.
Totally unenforceable from a code enforcement, because we just can't go say if they're doing something wrong. They're, because the city manager said so, it's not one of our ordinances. So this is huge. It really is a big issue. And as Jerry said, the sidewalk sales, even though this isn't about that, that's number 2 with the stuff we're having to do, especially this time of the year with the holidays coming. lot of people showing up, selling wreaths, selling pumpkins, selling whatever, you know, for the holiday season. So hopefully this gets done quickly and an ordinance will be in place so we have something to enforce in the next couple months, because it is a big question. It's a huge question, and I guarantee you that I've received more calls than the people in this building right now. So I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you, Mr.
Anything else, Mr. Scott?
Good
Seeing
job.
none, anyone else wishing to speak? Yes, sir. Give your name and address, please.
If you don't mind me taking my mask off.
Yep.
My name's Jeremy Gray. I live out at 1400 County Road, 17A Community Church out there. I'm the guy who went to the businesses. I already have a little food truck that kind of ran through the summer. I own the last 2 years Charm City Coffee Roaster, named after the city of Charm. So I did try to do it by the book, and I figured out, you know, going through that, there was no book to go by. So I'm very glad that you guys are meeting here today, because when you're out there operating, you're like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing or not. You know, I'm hoping, you know, that I got all my ducks in a row, because I think we're in the same mindset that we want to do it right. You know, we're not out trying to be rogue and, you know, anti, you know, establishment or anything. But there was nothing to go by. So it's good that you're here. And it is great to hear. I don't know how many people were, you know, calling, but it's great to hear that there is this well of interest in this type of thing, because I think we're a great atmosphere to wherever they are. It's very fun. It's very unique. You have established businesses, but they're always, you know, traditional, something that you can always get, and pretty much in brick and mortar, you know, they're usually the same, but food trucks are usually a little unique, and it's more fun. They create a nice little atmosphere when they have the events. You're like, wow, I've never had this before. Look at this. It's a neat little thing. And you travel around. It's never like that with brick and mortar. So, just as someone who's operated in Avon Park and around Highlands County for the last couple of years, and this summer with the mobile truck, you know, the one thing I would just say, don't make it so impossible for people to be clients, give up and go home, you know, because Highlands is known for not having a lot of things for families and young people to do. And he quoted these stats. This is really something that the younger people are interested in, you know, and this is something they would gravitate to. So it would be fantastic to be known for something like that. In fact, one of my visions with this type of thing is to have something weekly or monthly where we're downtown, having a nice little atmosphere with the food trucks and music and, you know, whatever people sell on sidewalk sales, that sort of thing, making a nice big event, because it is something for the younger people to do. There's not much to do here for younger people. That's something I've heard about since I've lived here. And I have a family here, and my sister has a family here. We have friends here. They have families, and that's one of the things is, you want to do anything, you gotta go outside of town. So this is one of those things that's coming to town. So I think it's great that you guys are encouraging. I think the atmosphere here has been positive and supportive, and it's great to hear. I was a little worried when I saw it, I was like, what's this going to be about, you know? But to see your attitudes on the council today is pretty encouraging. That's all I got.
I have one question for you, if you don't mind. Since you've been doing this since last summer, you said, what kind of issues have you had due to COVID-19? From what precautions that weren't normal?
You know, one of the great things about this is that the COVID-19 didn't really hurt us a whole lot because we're outside. My truck is, you know, we work outside the back, we're open air. We don't have any seating capacity or anything like that. We wore our masks, we washed our hands, we, you know, sanitized everything. COVID-19 didn't really hurt us. People were already outside doing their stuff, and they were looking, and we were going to the businesses that were open. That was our model. And we do some, you know, events and things like that, but it never really slowed us down. What slowed us down was government regulation, and not the Avon Park, but we lost the whole month of June, a lot of revenue, because we were bouncing back between the DPPR and the agriculture, whatever, and no one could figure out, because we were doing something they had never done before, whatever, and we lost the whole month of June and a lot of revenue. So I would encourage you guys to, you know, make it nice and simple and easy, you know, something people can comply with, just like that, people who want to do it.
Anything else for Mr. Gray? Thank you, sir.
I have one more question for Jerry.
Go ahead.
Jerry, in the C4 where there's no requirement for parking, would that be somewhere where, I know that businesses that open up there typically do have designated parking, but would those be exempt from the parking requirement in the LDR for food trucks? Because the parking is open for everybody on the C4? You know where I'm
You mean,
going with that.
if you had an open parking lot that they could utilize that?
No, what I mean is
I-
on the C4, businesses are not required to have spaces, private parking spaces, because in the C4 you can park on the street. So would
Yeah.
that be an area, where the food vendor would not have to meet the compatibility with our code because the parking is already available on the street for the business? So technically, every business that has parking on the street is graded.
Well, I would say that that's really up to you all, because we could draft it so that it's not, or we could draft it so that it can. My preference would be to be as liberal about it when you start as you can, and then see how it works. If they're taking up all the parking spaces and the retail stores can't get people to stop because there's no parking, then we'll have to crack back on that. If it's abused in some way, then you'll have to just stop that aspect of it. But you can regulate that. I'm pretty confident in that.
Well, my preference, I would love to have a parking problem in downtown Yvonne Park.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that, wouldn't the vendor have to get permission to park there, to put their vending trucks there anyway, so they would automatically.
They
know
couldn't.
that.
They couldn't put it there. They couldn't put their trucks in that parking because that's public property and or a right of way, depending on where you're at. And that's not going to be allowed. I mean, we, not only us, but DOT wouldn't allow it either.
The parking lot?
They can put it in a private
Yeah,
parking lot. They just can't.
Yes. That's what
Well,
I'm
if they put themselves in a private area and they allow the people that are coming to visit their food truck to park in public parking, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, you can allow that for a period of time and see how it works out. And then if it doesn't work out, then crack back on it.
I'm fine with that. Me too.
Anyone else? wish to speak?
That's how I understood Maria's question anyway.
Yes, sir. Please give your name and address as well.
Hello. So nervous. Jonathan Hernandez. I'm from 1105 Blue Jay Road,
Okay.
Huachula, but I'm more closer to Edmond Park. What I do food clubs. I do edible arrangements and all that. And I wanted to see, I've already got my tax ID. I've been doing everything what I have to do to try to do my trailer and everything. I would just, everywhere I go, before I even pull my stand there, I like to ask permission. And everything I have in my trailer, I already have a janitor. It's a quiet one. It doesn't make no noise, nothing like that. My dirty water, I have it in a little tank. My clean water, I have it in a big tank too. So everything I do, do it the right way, proper way. And that's what I do. All I do is just do it.
Have you set up around Yvonne Park before?
Yes.
Are you the guy that's over there just west of the Big T Tire?
Yes. No.
No.
That's not me. That's not me.
Okay.
I'm the one who has a red trailer.
Okay. Well, then that would be compatible because it's food, right?
Well, yes, fruit. Yeah, and I was thinking about in the future, thinking about doing like tacos, but I wanted to, before even doing anything, I gotta see and ask permission.
The truck that you've been on Cornell and Memorial before?
No.
No? Someone sits up there sometime.
It's the same person that does it just east, just west of Big T. He kind of moves around.
Okay.
Well, I would just tell you that, obviously you have to comply with the state regulations, and then whatever we end up finalizing, you have to comply with those regulations, and you'll be good to go.
Well,
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
appreciate it. Anyone care to speak? Have any questions? Again, just give your name and address, please.
My name is Chanita Pierce, and I happened to just call because I was thinking about one of the little trucks, actually for the kids, like Italian ice cream and treats and stuff.
Could you step up to the microphone a
I
little
don't
bit?
have anything for the kids here, and nothing for them to do. But I ended up calling code enforcement, and then he just told me about the meeting, so I decided to come and see, because I was trying to do it the right way also. So I was just trying to find out more information.
Okay.
I'm glad you came.
Very good.
I think the only concern I have, maybe Jerry can speak to this too, we brought it up about parking close to another restaurant. My concern would be is if a restaurant, say, didn't have barbecue or Italian food or pizza or something like that, that they would allow a truck in their parking lot to serve that food to boost their menu. But then again, right across the street would be a competition. That's would be a type of regulation we'd have to, I think, put in there that,
Within so many feet.
yeah, because, I mean, even 100 feet wouldn't be enough. And I hate to see, one business steal business from one across the street by bringing in a food truck that serves as competition food. That's some way I
Yeah.
would like to be able to limit if possible.
Yeah, I think Jim's right. I mean, I think you have two types of competition. You have the competition, which is head to head, Italian food, pizza to pizza, tacos to, Mexican restaurant type situation. And you also have just the fact that they're providing food near another restaurant. They may choose the other food as opposed to the rest of the bricks and mortar restaurant food. So you need to be concerned about those two, and you can have different distances for each. Obviously, you want the head-to-head competition further away than necessarily the restaurant, competition, the general restaurant competition.
Okay.
Maria, let me ask a question. You remember the lady that, the hot dog lady?
Hottie dogs.
Yes, 27.
Bikini sales.
Well, whatever. Now, that would be, she was on 27 where the vegetable stand is. The down the street was the burger thing. Across the street was McDonald's or what have you like that. So how would that affect it, Jerry?
Well, I'm not sure I'm not sure the chain restaurants are really that much, a head-to-head competition with anybody because they have a special, I guess, a way of doing business, which is a fast food basically, as opposed to, cooked food that somebody's going to pick up and take. It's going to take a while to cook it. But, it may be. I'd still be careful of that. But I'm unsure it would be as much of an issue as, say, your Italian restaurant having somebody open up across the street with, making pizza. That'd be a huge issue.
Well, if we're gonna have to do it within a certain radius or distance, then I think that would be appropriate. But would there be something on here like, when you have in zoning, when you want to open up a dress shop in a residential area and you have to ask all your neighbors' permission, would we have to have something like that where if you're going to sell pizza 100 feet from a pizza joint, are they going to have to go down to the pizza joint and say, hey, I want to do this, would you be okay with it? I mean, or setting the limits and distance would be sufficient on our end.
I think that would
Yeah,
make more sense.
I think we just have to be careful when we do that we don't set up a protection racket where somebody says, well, I'll be okay with it if you pay me this amount of money. I think there is there is some validity to somebody who says, well, I'm selling hamburgers, but I'd really like to have it if I could sell pizzas, have somebody sell pizza out front because that would add more to my business or something, and or somebody that sells hot food, having a smoothie place, a food truck come in and make smoothies, that might add to it as well. Those circumstances, we just have to, play it by ear until we develop regulations for it that are proper.
Okay. Dave?
Can I ask a question about this?
Yes, sir. You just have to give your name and address again.
Chairman Gray, 1400 County Road 17A. Just about because our business model, we don't go and just set up someplace. Or generally not. I mean, we did actually set up a Pure Grit a couple times, but that was kind of like the only thing. Our business model was people called us, we would go and make the stuff right there and take it inside, whatever. So, so I don't know if you have some zoning thing where I have to go in and ask permission, because I make, there's all up and down Main Street. We did, business all up and down Main Street that we're going. If we're called to some place that's really close to another place that may sell a drink or something that we have on menu, and they, I can't go to every single person that's
No,
asked.
yeah, we're trying to avoid that.
Yeah, okay,
You're not a food truck though, in the sense that you can be parked somewhere. You deliver, you're
Well-
like an Uber coffee.
It's a
Yeah,
combination of
it is,
both.
it is and it isn't. I mean, I would just simply say that, if they're just going to be there for like an event, let's say your car dealership there wants to have an annual, grand opening or a grand annual big sale or something like that, then they might invite, some food trucks in to try and get people to get some people into their area. That's something that's a special event type issue to me.
All right, so it wouldn't be, I have to ask everybody in town.
No.
Okay, that's the only thing I
We'll
would.
stay with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Scott? Could you give your name and address?
Well,
again?
it's not impossible that you could have, like a block party if you wanted to do something like that. Now, yes, you're starting to get a little far afield, but, you could say, for a block party, somebody can come, but there'll be some people that'll want it and some people that don't, but at least it wouldn't be something that's going to be there every day, week after week.
Okay, yes, sir.
John Scott, 4538 East Pine Road, Avon Park.
Yes, sir.
I don't mean this to sound bad against any of our restaurants. I love the restaurant. They get lumped all the time. But he covered most of what I was going to say. But is there an ordinance where I can't go and open up, say, a pizza place right across from the pizza place in town, across the street? I'd be a restaurant, they'd be a restaurant.
Yeah.
I'm classified by the state as a restaurant, essentially. So is there a reason to create a second-class restaurant class over another one? Now, me personally, no, I would not go and set up right across from a local coffee shop 5 days a week. But you brought up a good point. We're provided to a business. That can be something we don't have to jump to a million hoops. Or no, you can't go here. I'm sorry, I can't come to your grand opening because there's a coffee shop 102 feet away. And it has to be 150 feet away. Take that up with the city. So just keeping that in mind, like either we're a restaurant or we're not. So if I'm allowed to open a brick and mortar store anywhere across from another one, putting that, creating another class.
That's a totally different circumstance than rolling a food truck in, across the street from a pizza place, than if you were to buy or lease a restaurant, for a period of years, and put Italian and then go head-to-head competition. Then, that's between you and the other Italian restaurant. But if you're just going to roll a truck in every day and you have no, lease, you have no property taxes, that you have to pay, you don't have any insurance, things like that, then, there's a huge difference between those two circumstances, I got to say.
I just want to see, so if, like, brought up a restaurant bringing in a food truck and they're just for an event or whatever. So if you're saying that events are special events, I agree with that. I don't think it's not really ethical to come in and take the cheap route and try to put a company out of business. That's not what I'm not trying to say that at all. Just are you creating a set of regulations for one that don't apply to the other, or are you creating more regulation than is necessary?
No, I don't think so. I think what we're trying to do is expand the parameters that we do have. The one thing that I would like, that I personally would not be in favor of is, I'll give you a prime example. There's a pet shop from Orlando that sets up a van in the parking lot behind an auto store here in town. They don't pay occupational license. They don't pay for fire inspection. They don't pay for the water utility, nothing. They just show up, pay the auto place $50, and then they end up, what happens is the veterinarians in town are undercut. And that's what I don't like. I mean, I want fair competition, but I don't want anyone to feel under. What we're doing is we're
No,
creating a whole different. You know, and I think that's what he was trying to say. So
Okay,
I
I
don't think
just
it's a
wanted
different
to-
set of rules. We're trying to create new.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just simply say that there's no statute protecting somebody like that. And, sales, their standard regulations right now, land development, is that the sales of products and foods have to be done inside a building. So, that's already prohibited.
Yeah, I mean, we have our vendors, I mean, our businesses, they pay, impact fees. When they open up a restaurant, they pay fire assessment, they pay for all the services. And when you would roll up in park and then you don't pay any of that other than the rent for the space that you're gonna be renting from. That's the difference between you and the local businesses.
The rent I'm paying from the person. who
But
pays
that's
on
to
it.
them, that's not to the city. Right, so, you're looking at something that benefits you, it benefits us in the sense that we have another service offered to us. But that's just a philosophical approach that I have, I don't know how the rest of the council
Understand,
feels on
understand.
that. But I mean, I'm all for having what you want to offer, and if we can expand, which is Main Street, where the requirements for parking is different than what it is on Highway 27, then maybe there would be a way for you to be able to do it on the Main Street businesses where the patrons that come to see you can park on Main Street, not necessarily in the business itself, and we don't have to have the same compliance as you would on Highway 27.
Yeah.
So that's something that he's gonna have to put together, because I don't have to really all do it.
I think he said it better than me, is, just make it not so hard on us to say, well, we're too close to them, we can't come to your event. So that's mainly. what
Yeah,
I'm-
no, as I mentioned in my memo, I would encourage you to make it, as liberal as possible right now. And then, tighten it up as, you find that it's being abused or it doesn't work right.
I guess, anyone else wishing to speak?
The only other thing I would add is that in here he has, Jerry put on that there would be no benches, no chairs, and stuff like that. I don't object to a stand-up table.
Yeah, I put that note in there too. If it's attached to the truck itself, if they have an
Yeah.
awning that folds out, or if they have some type of table for all the condiments.
Right.
Hey,
Right, and even if it's a standalone table.
Right.
Because right now this one right here said that you can't have any table seating of any kind. I'm not saying seating, I'm looking at, a tall table, maybe where you can just stand up and eat your food rather than eating it in your car. I'd rather see something where people are actually covered around and you can see a little activity there.
They have a tendency of throwing away their trash.
Yeah, but then that would be in here where the owner of the thing would have to collect all his garbage out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Well, we don't want
That's
people
fine.
grabbing the food, walking a quarter mile to their
Right.
place of business and throwing it away on the side of the street.
Yeah, as long as they clean up afterwards, because, you have a table, stuff that tends to fall down around it, and as long as the food truck people clean up afterwards, certainly that's not a problem.
All right, so obviously the object here is to mark this up how we see fit and hopefully get something to Jerry so that we can make a coherent ordinance.
Yeah, can I jump off, guys? Because they're waiting on me to go to dinner. Okay,
Hopefully you're visiting. Please.
thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
All right, is there any discussion amongst council on these regs so far?
Can I add something?
Yes,
there?
please.
Sorry. And I don't know, I looked through this, but I don't know if it was in there. I've heard a couple different questions when they call me. Is there anything that I missed that's self-contained versus pulled behind like a truck, like a utility trailer that has a barbecue grill on it, that has a water cooler that's got lemonade in it? Or does it have to be a self-contained, like a bread truck, where the traditional food truck that you think, all I saw is a can, you disconnect it off, it's got to be able to be readily moved. Which if you pulled in with a pickup truck and a 12-foot utility trailer behind it, you could set up there.
And that's readily moved, isn't it? I mean, I
That's
think
readily
the purpose
moved.
was
So
to
I
make
think,
sure-
honestly, to me, something important would be, if you're gonna do this, if both are allowed, then so be it. But I know most of those are self-contained vehicles. I call it a bread truck, but they look like that, where they have the hole in it and you walk up to the counter. But I can also see somebody, well, like, I think he's pulling, his is pulled behind the truck. So I just caution that, maybe incorporate both if you're gonna go that way, because then he's wasted all his time if you're just gonna say. And that may, again, I don't know, but I've traveled about and I've seen them both ways. But I didn't really see that mentioned here.
Yeah,
It had to be self-contained. I probably missed it, but,
I don't see that.
okay, that's just something to think about.
Yeah, I don't see a reason why you couldn't start out with both, and
Yeah.
like
And
Jerry's
you said,
saying, if it becomes a problem.
yeah, I mean, what I would not want to see is like 30 barbecue trucks around town, just all set up all over the place.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's gonna come down to practicality. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not very practical to have, a piece of a food truck here and a piece of a food truck there. Ultimately, they're gonna do like what this gentleman did, or they're gonna do like what the red trucks are.
I'm okay with something huge to the truck.
I would agree.
Okay. Is there anything else, discussion thus far? Seeing none, that concludes our agenda, so I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn, please.
Seeing no opposition, we are adjourned.